Okay, so hello and welcome to this video explaining more about the joint degrees that we offer here at the University of Reading, combining business with modern languages. So my name's Sophie Heywood. I'm an associate professor in French, and I'm also the director of admissions in languages. And I'm joined today here by my colleague over at the Henley Business School, Dr. Jo Lane, who's lecturer in strategy. And also the programme director for the BSc International Business and Management with a Modern Language.
Hi.
So today's video is all about explaining to you, talking to you about what the kinds of joint degrees with business and languages that we offer, how we teach them, what kind of things you study, what kind of opportunities are available, and what kind of careers our graduates go into. But first of all, I think it's really important to answer the big question, which is why combine business and languages? Why do so? So Jo and I have just been chatting about this at length, actually. So we'll try and kind of sum up some of our ideas on this. But essentially, I think the first thing is you can really stand out because you develop such a wide and varied skill set. You develop hard language skills, so the ability to converse, write, speak, translate across two different languages. But also, you're developing your knowledge and expertise in business as well. So a strong understanding of how businesses work. So it's an interdisciplinary degree. You are a real you've got a really, really varied portfolio of skills that can give you the edge in a lot of careers. And I'd like to hand over to Jo, actually, because I think it's really important to have the business studies perspective on why including a language in business degrees is such a useful thing to do.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. Absolutely. It's really, really important, I think, when we think about the world of business and we think about what does it look like in 2022 and what will it look like when graduating students are entering into the workplace. And what the kind of the words that we think about are this kind of very international business context and a globalizing business context. So having a language alongside businesses and business skills means that whether you are looking to work for the increasing number of very international organizations that operate in the world, whether you're looking to work in another country for a British company or American or European company, for instance, that has moved into that new market or industry, and you have skills in the language or the history and the background and the culture of that national context, that's really important because organizations want people who understand the ethos of the markets that they're serving, the cultural experience of the consumers or perhaps the colleagues that you'll be working with. So they want people with the skills in not only the world of business, but to be able to interpret and understand at a kind of very deep level this kind of very international, diverse set of businesses that we have operating. So Sophie's absolutely right. You get the deep language skills and the cultural skills there, but also we really say, well, what do you need to be a global business kind of employee or worker in the global workforce? And it's really about that flexibility and that ability to be able to apply your experience throughout your degree, working perhaps abroad or studying in a different country, and saying, yes, I can apply that. I can understand where colleagues are coming from or where different organizations are coming. So this idea that you've got interdisciplinary, but also different kind of national context and international context to kind of draw on from your experience base really makes you a very attractive employee. Organizations are crying out for people who can deal with, growing into new markets and deal with an increasingly diverse and international workforce. So you come out at the end of your degree looking, very attractive to employees in this very global world that we're living in.
And I should add that one of the really key ways in which you develop that knowledge and that expertise, that understanding of how other countries and cultures work, is first of all through the way that we teach languages here at Reading, through what we call our culture modules, but also through the opportunities that we offer our students on these programmes through their year abroad, which is integral to the whole degree, to go live, work, study abroad. So there's opportunities there to gain that really exciting, really valuable experience of another workplace, how the workplace operates in another country, all sorts of really exciting stories to tell on your CV, basically, or indeed to study abroad, to go and study with big business schools in Europe and beyond. And so I think as we're kind of pointing to, this is not only something that will give you, the edge in a range of careers, but I think also kind of put a bit of a rocket booster on things. And yeah, it shows here, I think, in sort of the article in The Economist that suggests, speaking another language can translate into an earnings boost, which I think, as we were saying, is just it's always going to be a good thing. It's always going to help you in your career, and whether that translates into a big earnings boost or just a really great range of opportunities to kind of grab a hold of, I think is the way I would put it.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think when you think about how business is done across the world, business is done differently in different places. So understanding that from a very international context as well, it again adds to that attractiveness as an employee, as a future graduate going out into the world, saying, yes, I've worked here, or I've studied this language and culture intensively, so I understand how French business differs to perhaps Italian companies or German or Spanish, and UK and European companies are all very different. So anything that can set you apart from other graduates who are coming into the marketplace without those skills, that's really going to help you in the workplace. And again, I keep saying that you're an attractive employee, but it gives you this skill set. It makes you stand out. It's another line to add to your kind of skill set that says, yes, I can do this and I can understand different contexts.
And I think, just to end, it's been something that we've talked about in the newspapers, in the press for a very long time in this country, but graduates in the UK with language skills are really, really in short supply. The CBI, the business organisation, has been hammering this home for years and years and years. We need grads with language skills. So go into a marketplace where those skills are valued and where there's not many people with them, can only be a good idea. Okay. Let's talk to you a little bit then about the kind of degrees we offer. So here at Reading, there are two types of joint degrees with languages and business. There's the first one that we call the BA Modern Languages and Business, and that offers pretty much an even split. So you share your time more or less between Henley Business School and us here in the Department of Languages and Cultures. With the exception of the first year, where there's slightly more modules of the core modules in business. That's a 4-year degree with a year abroad. And I really want to highlight, we offer languages, the core languages of French, German, Spanish and Italian. We offer them all from beginners. So you don't have to have studied a language before to come and do a degree with us here. We have an intensive accelerated language learning program. We have long experience of teaching beginners. So if you don't have any qualifications in the language, that's fine. We know exactly how to help ensure, and all of our graduates, by the end of their degree, if they've worked hard and if they've done their year abroad, they should be graduating at the same level. They'll be in the same class and be graduating with near native level in the language. We also offer from intermediates. If you've done a GCSE but A-level wasn't available, or you decided not to do it but want to pick it up again, that's great. We've got intermediate and advanced for those of you who have done an A-level in the language. And as I say, all of you by the end should be up to near native level. The second type of degree that we offer is the BSc in International Business and Management with a modern language. Now, this one is also a 4-year degree, including that year abroad, But there is an option, because this is part of a pathway in international business. And Joe, you can come and correct me in a second. But there is the option to decide at the end of first year not to take it with a year abroad. This one's different in that you major essentially in business, so you spend about 80% of your time, out of your 6 modules per year with the business school, and then 2 modules with us in languages across all of the years. Again, those are offered. You can do those languages from beginners, intermediate, or advanced. And again, you will be doing enough language to be graduating nevertheless by the end at near native level. We particularly, you include that year abroad, which just puts a real boost to your language skills. You'll certainly be doing plenty of language to get up to the near native level. And again, that's offered. The choices, you can add that French, German, Spanish and Italian. Joe, did I present that programme accurately?
Perfectly, yeah. Thanks, Sophie. What I would reiterate there is that the language is fully embedded in the International Business and Management programme. So in the business school, we have various pathways, as Sophie mentioned, and there is an option to take it to switch essentially onto a 3-year version of a international business and management programme without this year abroad. I think we'll talk a little bit later about the benefits of the year abroad and how that's really embedded in the actual programme design and how we perceive that to be a benefit for students. But essentially, it's very similar in terms of your first year, for instance, to other degree programmes, and becomes much more specialised as you work your way through the 4 years. And we'll talk a little bit about the modules and options in a moment. But essentially, it's the business emphasis rather than the language emphasis. But equally, it is more than just taking an odd option in French or Spanish. It's really embedding that language within the programme as a whole.
Lovely. Which I think leads us to that. We're going to start talking to you in more depth about the kind of things that we do and the kind of teaching that we offer. Before we start, though, I think it's really important to just underscore that the University of Reading is a research-intensive university, which means that the teaching, your lecturers, it's all underpinned by research excellence. You'll be taught by experts in their field. So, Joe, can I just ask you to explain to us a little bit about the kind of research that goes on in business, please?
Absolutely, yeah. So within Henley Business School, there are various departments and schools within the school that each focus on a different area of business. So it could be marketing or accounting or international business and strategy. So that's my own department where I sit. And what we have faculty members who are actively researching in these areas. So it could be, for instance, there's a book on the left-hand side of your screen there, which is called International Business. And this is on its 8th edition now. And this is a core book for any students really studying international business. And it's co-written by one of our professors, Professor Rajneesh Narula. And he's an expert in this area in terms of what is international business? How do companies that are looking to grow, how do they make those decisions to move into different markets? What kind of considerations do they need to take into account? So we have areas of kind of specialism there, which is very much on the international element. And on the other side, we have kind of almost the exact opposite, which is there's a book there, Industrial Clusters, which is one that I edited recently with some colleagues in the business school and elsewhere. And what this is doing is saying, well, how does business work on a very microscopic level, at a very, very localized regional level? And that's of interest to people who are interested in regional policy, in industrial clusters, in why certain organizations work together in different areas and why they start to kind of cluster together over time and what are the benefits of that. And we look at this in our research, and then we feed that into our teaching when we have these very specialist modules in 2nd and 3rd year, whereby you're getting taught by people who are actively researching and publishing in these areas. So we have people working on human resource management, on all sorts of things, flexible working arrangements, and they feed all of that into their modules because they're publishing now, this year, next year, in these areas, and have been for many years. So they want to share that and really embed that in the modules that we teach. So there's just two examples there from the business school. But if you go onto the Henley Business School website, you'll see research centres, and you can see the very broad areas that we generally tend to research in. But as Sophie said, we're all active researchers. Part of our job is teaching, and part of our job is researching, and the two go hand in hand really for us.
Thank you. On the languages side, then, in languages research, I think is very multidisciplinary. We cover all sorts of areas because we are specialists in other countries and other languages. That's other cultures. That's what we do. And so we cover history, politics, culture, literature, cinema, film, in the regions of the languages that we speak and that we teach. But we also do research into things like translation. There's a lot of us who are professional translators, or indeed who look at kind of the theory and the history of translation, how books and ideas and films and so forth cross borders, reach new audiences, are brought up by publishers and repackaged for new readers and new markets. So we also look at linguistics, how languages work, how they've evolved, the history of languages, the uses and abuses of language. You can see there the red book, the title is Odio, excuse my horrendous Italian pronunciation, which means hate. That's a recent book by Professor Federico Falloppa, who is a specialist in hate speech and combating hate speech. And he works with the European Commission on combating hate speech, on developing their policies to dealing with this enormous issue. So he works with stakeholders, including things like Google, Facebook, helping them to work out how to develop policies and work on this particular issue. And you'll see later on that he runs several linguistics modules that help students to think about how languages work, how they shape what we do. There's lots of us working in literature. Again, when you're learning a language, that's a really, really brilliant thing to do, is to really kind of deepen your understanding, seeing how the language can be used in incredible and beautiful and experimental ways. And we do all sorts of research into different types of literature. I do children's books. Sherilyn Elston works on literature and writing and testimonial in the Colombian conflict. And then the book there, you can see literary imaginings of Argentina's history and independence, the blue book in the middle there. So we cover literature across the world. We have a specialist also in Mauritian literature, writings of the Indian Ocean. So you can really go on journeys across the world and across all sorts of different types of literature. And then there's lots of colleagues working with international charities, non-governmental organisations. For example, our colleague Marjorie Gerhardt is a specialist in World War I from the French perspective. And she's particularly interested in studying some of the horrific injuries that people sustained in World War I and how that moved on perceptions of injury, illness, psychological impact, the science of psychology and medical development generally. And she's worked a lot with charities, thinking about the kinds of facial injuries that people sustained, and also looking at the impact of World War I on the development of international philanthropy and charities. And so I've covered war studies, and last but not least, in our department as well, we're part of some of these big research centres as well. We co-direct, several of us co-direct the Centre for Book Cultures and Publishing. So again, lots of us are interested in how books get made, who makes them and where they get sold and so forth. So quite a distinctive research culture, I think, to Henley, but lots and lots of connections. Certainly we work with colleagues when we're talking about publishing. We have to work with colleagues in Henley Business School. Publishing is a big business. And the same goes, Federico's working with Google, with huge multinational companies. So there's lots of ways, I think, in which our research and therefore our teaching and our approach to our subjects different, but can kind of connect, and you as students are really encouraged to make those kind of synergies and connections. Okay, which leads me on, I think we should start to talk about the kind of things we teach. And so Joe, over to you.
Great, thanks, Sophie. Yeah, so earlier in the talk, I mentioned that there are these kind of core modules that are really the bedrock of understanding kind of how business and management works. What are the big concerns that organizations or companies or charities are facing? Excuse me. And so what we have is we have a series of core modules in the degree programs that we offer. And they apply certainly to international business and management with a modern language as well, is that we need to make sure that students coming out of our degree programs understand big areas of business, but then they also have the opportunity to specialize and to really start to focus down into areas that they find really interesting, or that they're perhaps interested in as a career, or that they might have really wanted to study at some point in their degree, and get the chance to do that when they've kind of got these foundations kind of grounded, so to speak. So we have core modules in big areas such as marketing, the principles of marketing, how organizations reach their customers, how they identify who their customers are, and the techniques that they can employ. So something that's very big at the moment is this push towards digital marketing. So how organizations that are very small can benefit from technology, for instance, on Facebook or social media sites, to be able to reach a very large audience kind of very cost effectively. So we teach the principles of marketing or accounting. It's really important for students to understand some of these kind of back-end processes that organizations undertake to make sure that they're quite literally balancing their books, and to make sure that they understand the kind of finances and accounting behind them. And then we teach really kind of cutting edge, kind of forward kind of leaning modules such as data analytics. The world is becoming a lot more digital, not least because of COVID and this kind of rapid technologicalization of the workplace, but that organizations are starting to use data more and more. So students going into the workplace need to understand, how can you present data? How can data be used and misused? How can we try and represent a narrative, for instance, using data that we've collected? Does it help us understand our customers more? Does it help us understand the world around us more? So we have these very big core modules that tackle essentially the big questions that businesses face, and the kind of the bread and butter, if you like, of running and managing a business. And then what we also have are these much more specific modules that are optional in part 2 and part 3. So you're kind of second and fourth year once you come back from your year abroad. And we have specialists who are specialists in entrepreneurship, for instance. So we'll run a module, the practice of entrepreneurship, which is very practical around, how do you start a business? What are some of the dilemmas and concerns that you might have when you're looking to start an organization or a business? How do, for instance, brands get built? How do we brand and market our products or services? And there's a really interesting module running at the moment, which is the dark side of marketing, which always kind of gets students' interest, because we assume that there's this kind of very positive side to marketing for organizations in reaching customers and selling more of their products and services. But as Sophie alluded to, things can get misused and misinterpreted, and often do with quite kind of very large consequences. So we're trying to understand some of the more nefarious processes to marketing and these ways of operating that aren't always kind of rose-tinted glasses. We apply a very critical lens to some of the practices and processes that we see in the world of business. And then there's often very specialist projects management modules, for instance, or you're very interested in the international elements. So how does strategy work at a very broad level for multinational enterprises, or much more operations? How do the day-to-day operations of an organization work? And these can lead you into very specific career paths, so marketing, or much more kind of quantitative accounting based methods, for instance, again, alongside your language. Or they can be an area of interest to explore and to really leave your degree with a very broad understanding of the international context, but also what different businesses do and some of the day-to-day concerns that they are facing. Because at the end of the day, when we leave our degree programs as students, we go into the world of work and we suddenly have to do this stuff. So understanding how that's done and some of the practical application is where, you know, our third year modules in particular become extremely practical and applied in their nature. So you get, you know, sales and development and business development experience working with local companies in Reading, for instance. We have great modules that connect students to companies and say, right, you're acting as management consultants, can you help them solve a problem? And this is really, really good for applying the theory and the context that we cover in these very big core modules to really apply that in the real world. So we find that students often really like to become specialised in these optional modules as they go through their degree. So the list is much more expansive than I can fit on this one slide. But essentially, you have the core business principles, organisational behaviour and the like, and then you have these very specific optional modules that you can choose to take at various points in your degree, and that it's really about options and flexibility. We want you to take your interests where they go, and we want to offer as many different areas of study as possible so that you can become an expert in marketing, for instance, through this program, or data analytics, and you can really take modules that push those angles. So I'll leave it there because I think the website as well has lots more information on these modules. But in a nutshell, that's the type of modules you can study within the business school.
Thank you. And then I think we've got, you're going to talk to us a little bit about how you go about teaching.
Yes, yeah. So the teaching in Henley Business School is a mixture of your traditional kind of lecture seminar idea of how you might think a university works. So a lecturer, someone like myself or my colleagues, standing in front of various large screens with lots of information on and teaching lectures to 100, 200 students at a time, imparting information to you about the big areas that you need to cover. And then we have much smaller group sessions, and we have seminars, tutorials, workshops. There's lots of different words for them, and they differ slightly in their orientation. But essentially, that's where students lead a lot of the discussion and a lot of the idea generation and problem solving. So we work on a kind of practical application in small group settings and seminars and workshops. And then the theoretical kind of lectures and the ideas that are being introduced to you through that kind of traditional lecture information transfer. And what we try and do is we try and really teach you through problem-based learning. So we'll give you real-world scenarios or problems to try and solve on your own or in groups. And a lot of this comes from our own experiences as academics. But a lot of it actually, a lot of our staff and faculty have come into kind of academia and become lecturers and professors off the back of long and successful careers in whichever industry they focused in. So we have, for instance, people who've had careers in management consulting, and they come and they become lecturers and professors in the department. So rather than it being research-led, it's experience-led. So they say, I've worked in this industry for 30 years. This is how it works. Or I'm working with these local companies or these big companies. Here are some problems we're facing. Let's look at them together. So we have this really nice mixture of academic researchers, practitioners, and people who've come in after 20, 25, 30 years of industry experience, really bringing all of that into the classroom and trying to kind of say, here are some problems, let's work on them together and see how we learn. The final thing I'd say is that we do have one option that is available to students on this program, which is it's called the Management Project, and it's very much a research opportunity for students to really engage with an area that they're interested in independent research. It's a kind of hefty module. You write a report at the end of it, and you go off with a supervisor and you research an area of business and management that you're really interested in. That can be international, it can be local, it can be very large, very small. But it's this idea that if you have ideas that you're interested in, we run with that and we take your lead and we say, what are you interested in? I'd like to figure out how students perceive the fairness of the recruitment processes that very large organizations are running. Or we'd like to kind of consider how students perceive their chances of success in the workplace. Well, we have thousands of students at the University of Reading, and a lot of our students then go and interview them and survey them and find out lots of interesting questions and answers, and then craft it into a management report that helps us solve a problem or answer a question in the world of business. So there's taught elements and there's also a research element in there for you. All of that is assessed in a very diverse way. We use lots and lots of different types of assessment. Not all exams. In fact, there's a move away from exams in many of our large modules. We're trying to offer as many different ways as we can conceive of kind of testing your application and understanding. Again, lots of those are very course specific, but you're not going to just get taught lectures and then sit an exam at the end. It's much more diverse than that.
Brilliant, thank you. That sounds great. Now I'm just going to move on to talk to you about how what goes on the languages side of the degree programme. So in languages, there are two main components. So essentially throughout your degree, and that depends, it can be either for the real 50-50 joint or for the international business and management. You'll still be doing these two components. So all students throughout their degree, they'll do each year one big language module, and then that's supplemented by what we call culture modules. Now I'm going to talk to you about the culture modules first, because I hope you'll be able to see how these kind of connect up and complement the kind of things you'll be studying over in business. So culture modules are where language students really deepen their understanding of the language in the regions, countries, societies where they're spoken, and also broaden, really open up new perspectives, discover new ways of seeing the world, new ways of doing business, new ways of doing politics, new historical perspectives on things. Through studying the history, politics, culture, film, literature, theatre, song, in that language. As well as more kind of broad approaches to language like linguistics and translation studies. So I'm just going to I'm going to take you through some of the kind of what I would call pathways through the many options that we offer, because just as with Joe said, I can't unfortunately summarize all the kinds of different optional modules that we offer, and you can go on our website and get a bit more of a sense of the kind of things. But nevertheless, there are kind of broad areas where we do our language cultural modules. And first of all, we have lots of colleagues across the languages who are historians or who are interested in the kind of history of nations and the impact of globalization. So we study, for example, I'm going to take the example of the Spanish section. They study Spanish history from 1492, from the 15th century, and really look at the sort of the interactions between Spain and the so-called New World, Latin America, the independence movements in Latin America, and then the kind of very different ways in which the Spanish language evolved, and all the kind of different exciting literatures and histories that you can study through them. So we offer modules, for example, in the culture and revolution in modern Latin America. We offer modules on the history of Argentina and the south of Latin America. In German, we have specialists in post-war Germany and film. So there's lots of opportunities to study German history and German films. That one there is very popular. It's about Germany and its films about World War II, how Germany kind of recovered and reflected on and memorialized the massive trauma of World War II. And then, as I said, our research, this is teaching that is led by our research. I chatted to you earlier about the work that Marjorie Gerhardt does on World War I. So there she offers a module on World War I. We also, lots of colleagues are working in literature and identity and publishing. Again, very global in scope and all sorts of different types of literature, as I said before. So you can do work with Sherilyn, learning about how the Colombian conflict has been narrated. Julia Waters, who's a specialist in the Indian Ocean, and there's her book on the Francophone Mauritian novel. She does a really exciting module on how literature has been used by people to think about Frenchness, what it means to be French, who is French, in her and how migration and so forth has changed understandings of the French language and French literature. That's her module on the global French life stories, sorry. And then we offer some comparative modules as well. For example, the fantastic literature, fantasy. I offer one on children's books in France. What kind of stories do French children grow up reading? How has French literature had a huge impact on children's books generally? Did you know that Cinderella was actually French? Questions like that. And then we have modules on publishing, for example, there, writers and publishing in Spain. And last but not least, we have several colleagues offering modules on linguistics, so how languages work, how they've developed, the history of languages. So we have our colleague Melanie Schröter, who's a specialist in German linguistics and its uses and abuses by the far right in Germany. And she offers a module on the German language and national identity. How does language shape your understanding of who you are and the country that you belong to? Really, really interesting module that. You can learn about the history of the Italian language. And then also I talked about Federico Fellopper's research on hate speech. He offers several modules that are open to all students of languages. For example, here his module in final year, Language and Power, which looks at how our use of language that really shapes the way we understand the world and the way we interact with each other. You know, he talks about how languages don't just represent reality, they help create it. They create our understanding of what's happening. And again, their students do, you know, in lots of these modules, just like in Henley, we offer all sorts of different ways of teaching and getting you enthused and really into the subject. So we use things like archive resources. There's lots of big publishing archives, for example, here in Reading. And we offer lots of different types of assessment as well. So students may make podcasts, curate exhibitions, do little research projects for themselves, you know, all kinds of ways of getting our students interested and engaged. But I'm keen to sort of move us on here, talk to you a little bit about language modules. So the second component of a language degree then is your core language module. So that's where you'll develop skills such as writing, reading, speaking, listening in the language, and then translating across the two. Really, really, you know, those hard language skills that are so, so useful and exciting. And also that ability to work between two languages through translation, which is really, really useful, I think, in a business context and in a professional context. They are taught in small groups. You're immersed in the language. So they really develop your communication skills, your listening skills, your ability to kind of put the language into practice. Be confident to try and make, you know, use the language, manipulate the language straight away. And we have a very friendly, this is a friendly department. We do get to know our students really quite well. You're not just a face in a lecture hall. And that really, really is important in the language modules. That's where you really sort of develop that confidence to use the language, make mistakes, learn from them, reflect on them. And I should say for the business students in final year, we also run business specific language modules. So they're specially tailored for business students, and you'll do things like develop projects, learn about the business cultures in the languages you're interested in, do presentations, things like that, really develop your specialist vocabulary and specialist understanding. And if you're doing the joint, if you're doing the BA Modern Languages with Business degree, there is also the option to pick up an extra language, pick up an additional language, which again, if you're interested in international business, picking up another language is also quite a good idea. You can make some really, really nice combinations there. So we offer classes the opportunity to pick up Arabic, British Sign Language, Chinese. You can study French, German, Italian as an additional, Japanese, modern Greek, Russian and Spanish. And they're available from beginners only, and if you take them through the course of your degree, you can graduate with about intermediate level in those additional languages. So now I'd like to talk to you with Jo about the year abroad. It's such an integral part of the languages degrees here. And this is where I'll explain to you the various options that are available, but this is where you really do that thing of going, studying, working, living abroad. Really, this is what you've been building up to and what we've been helping support you to kind of build up to. And it's where you really get that huge boost to your language skills. You really are immersed, and that's really, it's an exciting opportunity. For lots of our students, it's the real kind of high point. Not to say that what we do here at Reading isn't absolutely fantastic, of course, but you know, I know that lots of us really, really love to go abroad, and this is a great opportunity to do so. And on their return, we just find students have kind of really grown. They've just, the confidence that they come back with after having managed to live abroad, to sort of function in another language, they come back and they're so much more confident. And in the language classes, you know, it's a question of shutting them up really, rather than encouraging them to speak. You know, they've got these superpowers of being able to chatter away in another language, and they're always really, really keen to chat away and do that. And so, you know, it's lovely to see the students returning. And I think, Jo, you were saying that you really noticed that in business as well.
Oh yeah, it's so nice to sit with students who come back from their year abroad or their placement, and they come back and it's absolutely buzzing to get back into their studies for their final year, but also to tell us what they've been doing and to really kind of share everything. And I sat down with some students the other day who'd come back from their year off. Sorry, not a year off. It's not a year off. It's a lot of work. A slight slip there, but year off from university context in Reading. But they come back and they say, Jo, we've been doing this, we've been doing that, and I can't wait because I'm really looking forward to doing this, or it's completely altered my mindset in terms of how I view my future or how I view my own interests and what I really want to do. So I think for lots of students, it's a maturing process. It alters the way they approach their studies. It alters the way that they consider, the next 5-10 years of their life in some instances. And it can tell them a lot about what they want to do or what they might not want to do, and gives them so many different experiences and opportunities that sitting down and talking to them for half an hour, 45 minutes, it's that, as Sophie said, it's trying to just kind of like say, wow, let's use this, let's get that momentum and push it into your final year of your studies. And from the business school, we have students coming back from placements all over the world and back from years abroad in lots of far-flung places. And they come back and they've got this level of being grounded. They know what they want to do. And from a very practical perspective, we do see kind of anecdotally that the way they approach their studies has fundamentally changed. And the way that they interact and use the resources of the university as well from a kind of academic perspective is they ask for things and they engage and they want things and they use all the resources that we have available because they have a year left and they really want to grab everything that they can. And a lot of that, I think, from talking to students, comes from that year after doing 2 years of study, going off, being independent and working through that year, whatever it is that you do, as Sophie will take you through the options, but then coming back and thinking, right, let's hit the ground running. And it's so nice to sit. I'm still buzzing from sitting and talking to my students and saying, wow, you've done fantastically. Let's use that energy into your final year. And then often we see them go off and do wonderful things after, either related to their year abroad or not, but with that sense of direction and purpose that I think really comes from having a solid kind of year where they are independent, they are in charge of their own kind of destiny in that sense. And they come back and they want to learn, they want to engage. And it's fantastic to see. It really, really is fantastic. I'll stop talking, but it's brilliant to talk about students because it's just so nice to see the smiles that they come back with. And we haven't seen them for a year. And, we're in contact with them and we'll, email and things, but they're off living their life, doing this wonderful thing. And then they come back and say, let me tell you all about it. And it's wonderful. It really is.
And that's lovely to hear from our perspective as well, I think, from the languages side. Right, as I promised, I'm just going to talk to you about the kind of options you have. So essentially, there are 3 options on this type of degree. You can go and study in one of our partner universities, and I'll take you through them in a second. But, you know, this is a great opportunity for you to study business in another university system, in another country, see how other countries teach business, how they approach the topic. You know, are there different are there different ideas, different perspectives? It can really open your eyes, I think, and really broaden your understanding of the subject. Again, boost your language skills, do that in the language, which is not easy but exciting, and a really kind of achieving that challenge is I think something that meeting that challenge, I think, is something our students really benefit from. Alternatively, you can be a school assistant, so working, this is through the British Council, and they send students across the globe. So any region where the language is spoken, you can go and work there. This is working in a local school, helping out with the English teaching. So a great chance to gain practical skills, you know, professional expertise, and a strong understanding of another education system, another schooling system, how they work, and also, of course, be paid for your time as well. And lastly, very popular with business students for very obvious reasons, is doing a work placement. And again, you know, for business students, that makes so much sense. Go and gain international experience. This is a chance to do in a supported way, gain international professional experience, go and work abroad. So I'll talk to you about that in a second. Briefly, I just wanted to set out the university partners. This is the current set that we have, but new partnerships are being negotiated all the time. Currently, though, you know, it's great to see we've got lots of really interesting business schools, one based in Paris there, another prestigious French business school out in Strasbourg, so near to the centre of the EU, as well as we have universities, and I know the one in Berlin listed there, but also Graz. These are lots of our partner universities have really good business schools. Even if they're not specialist business schools, I think down in Montpellier as well, they're really good for business. And also we have a specialist one down in Spain, in Madrid. The other thing I would just say about our partner universities is they're not just based in Europe. There is a chance to go farther afield. So we have, through Julia Waters' partnership, we have partner universities in the Indian Ocean, one with La Réunion. I have a student out there doing international development modules currently, really enjoying herself. As well as we have partnerships with Havana in Cuba and Puebla in Mexico. Also really interesting places to pick up business studies modules and see just the kind of very different perspectives that you could gain on your subject. And then lastly, how do we support the work placements? I'm guessing you'll be really interested to know about this. So here you're going to benefit from the expertise of 2 departments, essentially. Here in languages, we offer the languages specific support. We have all of our database of previous placements. So anyone that's accepted a Reading student before tends to be quite receptive to hearing from us again. So that's really useful. We also offer CV writing and interview strategies in the language. Plus, we organise exchanges with our returning year abroad students who are just a great mine of information, know all the current tips and things and opportunities and so forth. So they're really helpful. But I think also there is career support placement support over in Henley.
There is, yes. So with the size of the business school, we have our own careers service, Henley Careers, who their core purpose is to support business students and their careers. And that includes on the Joint Languages programme. So this is very much a experience-driven. Henley Careers can help you in application processes, in mock interviews, in helping engage your CV towards a business audience, for instance, to make sure that you pick on the right skills that you've been developing, and can market those through your applications and the like, but very much a business focus. So helping students, get business placements across the world. In terms of Henley Careers has a very long track record of engaging with very large and very small organisations across the world that are operating both in the UK, Europe and further afield. So can really help and have lots of contacts and support, one-to-one sessions, online sessions, reading your CV, that kind of thing, all really tailored towards the business element. So it can really complement, I think, the support and direction you get from the languages school as well.
And I think you can see just how that's showing in the list of all the exciting things that just some of our students have done here, all kinds of exciting placements to go on to. And I think this leads nicely to our conclusion, which is talking about what can you do with this kind of degree program of study? What do our graduates go on to do? And clearly, through all the knowledge and expertise and experience that you've built up over the course of this kind of program of study, you are really, really well set to go off and go and find really exciting opportunities. And you can see that in part because, as I said at the beginning, languages graduates are in short supply, graduates with languages skills and the kind of deep language skills that you get through the program of study here are really, really prized. So there's all sorts of different types of sectors that you can go into. Obviously, international finance, banking, multinational companies are very popular with our business grads. But, you're also very well set to go off into something like the civil service, diplomacy, and things like teaching, translating, interpreting in the media in all sorts of ways, and advertising and marketing and so forth. You're really, really well set. And I think, Jo, you pointed out earlier, actually, that if you go into something like teaching or translation, you've got actually a specialism, you've got a specialist knowledge there, which can set you up for really interesting kind of, slightly unusual, perhaps, sectors with sections.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think this comes into part of the flexibility of the program, which is designed to allow you within the international business and language kind of bracket, is to say, but actually I've done several modules in this type of area at a high level. I'm really interested in the data side or marketing or how companies use data or data in different contexts and all sorts of things. So whichever role you end up in, you've got this element of specialism to draw on, as well as that deep learning in terms of the language and culture that Sophie mentioned. So for me, it seems like a win-win, because you get the core skills that businesses want, the critical thinking, the problem solving, and then you get these core skills that the international world wants, which is these languages and these kind of deep understandings of the different ways in which things are done around the world. So I think this degree program really sets you up for these types of careers and these types of ideas where you can specialize or you can go more general. There's really a wide world of options available to you there.
I think just to give you a couple of stories to put some faces to this, really. Funnily enough, I've started off with a grad, Natasha, who didn't do business studies at university. She was very much a linguist, but ended up through her year abroad sparking this immense passion for marketing. And you can see here how she talks about how doing a languages degree was a real life-changing experience, and how on her year abroad, she moved her entire life to Chile, Santiago de Chile, for a marketing internship, which just, that she fell in love with marketing. And now she's a brand manager at Accor, a large European hotel chain. And she does their brand storytelling for, I think, the Northern European region. And here you can really see where that intercultural awareness, that understanding of how other languages and societies work, is really helping her just kind of plough ahead, really thrive in an international marketing role. And then there are students, graduates. We've got Ignatas Tsirkis here, who did the BSc in International Management and Business with Italian, and he has this incredible kind of creative streak in him, I think, and always did throughout his degree, from what my Italian colleagues have said. And he's works in fintech. You can tell I'm a linguist, not a business specialist here. But yeah, so he's UK based, and is really enjoying working with cloud computing, working with Google and in financial operations, and working for Apps Broker Consulting Limited. So great to see just some examples there, I think, of just some of the many areas in which students can go into with this kind of knowledge and background study. I think we should draw this to a close. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you, Joe. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. And I hope that you guys have found this helpful. If you have any further questions, or if you'd like to get in contact, do campus tours, anything like that, here is how to get into contact with us via email. And also, do recommend have a little look on Twitter to learn a little bit more about the kind of activities that we get up to and the kind of research that we're doing. So above all, good luck with your studies, and hopefully see some of you at Reading soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.